Very good. Okay.
Right, okay.
So we're going to talk about Cheltenham Ladies. If you just hold it up between the two of you there.
Oh, I've got all the names on the back.
Oh, yes.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I'll do that.
So you photograph there too or not? Yeah.
I will in a minute, but if you can just turn it towards the camera, holding it up between the two of you. Yes, okay, and start now.
Right, this is a photograph of Cheltenham Ladies College, Cowley House, taken about 1943, I think, with me as a child of about 10, I think. I just moved into the senior house of my school, which had a rather posh name, Cheltenham Ladies College, rather Victorian, and it's still called that. And it was, in a sense, rather a posh school, with a green uniform. It was always very green.
Say that again.
And it was founded in the early part of the 20th century by a very formidable woman called Miss Beale, who had a friend called Miss Buss. Miss Beale and Miss Buss, they are not like us, or something like that.
Miss Buss and Miss Beale, Cupid's darts do not feel.
Yes, they are not like us, Miss Beale and Miss Buss, that's right. And my family had a long connection with it because all five of my mother and all four of her sisters went there when it was first opened in the early 20th century.
19th century, no? 20th century.
20th century, early 1900s.
Ah.
That's the 20th century.
Yes, yes.
Right. Anyway, and in actual fact, it went on down the family, and when a cousin of mine wanted to send his twin daughters there, he hadn't got very much money, so he very boldly went to the then headmistress and said, I come from a family where 17 women in my family have all been to this college, and I wish to send my daughters there. Oh, they said, how wonderful, yes, you'll be very welcome. He said, I haven't any money. Ah, well, I think we could probably do something about that. And so they went on, which I think is a really very nice story because...
When was this? This was...
Well, this must have been 1970s, somewhere around there. Bill, it was my cousin Bill. Anyway, my sister Alison also went there, but she, being 11 years older than me, went much earlier. And by the time that I went to Cheltenham Ladies College, my sister was in her last term and was about to leave. And there's a rather nice photograph, pause for photograph, of her standing with her prefect's badge proudly on one shoulder, holding the hand of a very small sister, Janet, in my first term and her last term, and we're both in the school uniform. After that she had to leave. The thing about that particular school was that I had a lot of friends. I'm sitting next to one who is still my friend, Jane Green, now Jane Stacey, and in the back row is Elizabeth Stevens, now Elizabeth Watson, and there are lots of others that I remember the names of and are not so much in touch with now. But one tends to keep one's friends if you make really good friends in the early days. One of the distinguishing things about Cheltenham Ladies College was that it had a magnificent hall. It was known as the Princess Hall, probably called after an early Victorian princess, but it was very suitable as a possible contender for the House of Commons when in the war they made contingency plans, the government made contingency plans for moving from London into something a bit safer. And as Cheltenham was in the sort of middle of England and not particularly in an industrial area, they considered moving the whole government up to Cheltenham, and then they were going to take over all the houses that we lived in, and particularly the Princess Hall, which was going to become the House of Commons, in the event with the Battle of Britain and the fact that the threat of invasion left. We didn't need to use it, but I felt rather proud to think my school might have become the seat of government.
And so what age did you start there?
I started there at the age of 6. I'm a 6-year-old holding Alison's hand, and she was a 17-year-old in that photograph.
And what was it like? I mean, do you remember the early, you were 6 or 7 years old there? Was it terrifying, or was it?
No, I was in a junior house, which actually was rather nice. Dad and I went to visit it once when we were up in that area. It was a lovely house called Seven Springs, which is actually where the Thames is meant to rise. And we had great fun, and there was wonderful fields to explore and woodland to explore. And we had a very nice house lady who ran us all. And we went in by bus from there into Cheltenham every day and back, because the houses actually within Cheltenham itself were being held for the government. It was never terrifying, except when I actually got to being much more senior. And then, because I was in a year, I was very young for my year, I could keep up academically. Jamie had the same problem, you may remember, in Marlborough, but was emotionally and in development generally a whole year behind. And I was made a prefect much too early. The not very nice headmistress of the whole school was called Miss Popham, and she tended to talk about what was that phrase?
Proconsular.
Proconsular stock, that's right, because my dad was a governor. And she rather sort of tended to favour children whose parents had titles and things, which we thought was terribly snobbish of her. But anyway, I had a not very nice house lady called Miss Wace.
So, sorry, proconsular stock would then have been a denigrating thing to say.
No.
Very
proconsular stock.
Yes.
Establishment.
You know, people who who rule and things, that sort of thing. Anyway, I was under a lot of pressure for exams, and when I'm under great pressure, my memory goes. I kept forgetting things. I wasn't a good head of house, which is what Miss Popham thought I was going to be. Miss Wace thought I was dreadful, although she did write a letter, which I found the other day, to my parents saying, what was it that she said? She said something, rather soapy and soupy, like, what a charming girl, or something.
Something like that, yeah.
But actually, she completely ruled me out as head of house, and I wasn't allowed to be head of house. She wouldn't talk to me. We had a complete block of silence. So there was a very unhappy time when I was boosted up too high. And then I was allowed to go to the most senior house. And that was great again. And I was with my friends like Jane Green and Di Potten and various others.
So this thing with Miss Wace, how old were you? You were sort of 16 or something?
I suppose I must have been, I was probably 15, because I left when I was only just 17. When I'd finished school by 17. One of the things that we did enjoy doing, I joined a club that was in a school organised by a lovely, very energetic lady. It was called the Cotswold Club. And we all had bicycles, and we used to bicycle down from our houses to the main college hall. And we used the bicycles on our Cotswold Club jaunts. And she used to take us, she always used to take us to look at the Cotswold villages and their churches. That I suppose we must have got to in buses. But I remember the bicycles because she rode an upright one called a sit-up and beg with a huge great basket in the front. But she used to take us around churches, and I think that's where I got my interest in and love of very old churches, lovely stone churches. And the Cotswold villages are just lovely. The Cotswold countryside is absolutely lovely. And I would like to have lived there one day. So that we did have fun, even in the war, even though the food was terrible. And I remember Sunday suppers. I think it was just bread and Marmite, and that was it.
And the rest of the time, what sort of things were you eating?
Terrible fish, dreadful blue. I remember...
Snook, was it? Snook?
I think it was whale.
It's
I think it
whale.
was whale. It was
Yeah.
terrible. But the funny thing, I was always hungry. I remember being desperately hungry and standing outside. I think I must have come back from games or something and was standing outside my house, which was St Hilda's house, thinking, God, what I could do with tomato soup and a steak and something. We never got them, of course. And my sister Alison used to remember me always being hungry, but we were very healthy. It was
But you had to eat very quickly, I remember.
and that's never left me either. An ability to eat very fast so you could get second helps.
That's right.
And are there any teachers that you remember or subjects you remember very fondly? Or
Yes, yes. Oh, history, very much. We had a wonderful history teacher called Little O. She was a very small lady, rather round, and her face was rather round, and she had very wispy hair, which she tried to keep in a bun at the back, and the wisps kept coming out. But she was, and that's why I think she was called Little O. She was called Miss Owen, but everything about her was round, from her bun to her face to her body. But she was brilliant at enthusing you with history, and that's why I read history, not very successfully, but I did read history at Cambridge later. She was nice, and then there was another wonderful teacher called E.B. Gosh, I can't remember her name. She went on to be she left Cheltenham much later, after I'd left, and went on to be headmistress of that school in Kent where Princess Anne went, beginning with B.
Binnenden.
Bennenden School. E.B. Clark, that was her, Miss Clark. She was splendid. And one rather dreary half-term, when I had to stay at school, everybody else went home for half-term and things, and I had to stay because I was, at that stage, yes, this was a not very pleasant period of being at Cheltenham, I was encased in plaster of Paris from my chin to my groin, absolutely all the way around. And she stayed, and she took me on expeditions and picnics and things.
How long were you in plaster of Paris?
I was in plaster of Paris for 6 months, and you can imagine the pleasure of when it was cut off and having a bath after that. It was, you know, your back was just so itchy. And I remember being very cross with this Wace, who was probably rather cross with me too, because in those days, in the war, the hot water ration was very rationed, and you were only allowed about 5 inches.
5 inches.
Wasn't it? 5 inches in the bath. And in fact, they used to draw a line around the bath, and you weren't allowed any more hot water than that. And of course, I couldn't get enough of it over me after I had to be cut out of this. And the reason I was wearing it is because I developed, and still have, what a lot of girls, particularly in their early teens, get, which is scoliosis of the spine. And they got in a bit of a flurry about it, and all sorts of awful things happened. I lived for quite a long time in a funny sort of cage with leather that was all strapped around my legs and round here to try and correct the
Osteo.
yes, the scoliosis, the curve of the spine. It didn't do any good. I think I was in plaster first to see if they could do something about it, and that didn't work. So they made this sort of cage and things. I think they wanted proconsul, my father, to be, you know, to be able to say they've done absolutely everything that medical expertise could devise to try and kill. In actual fact, it's something that happens to a lot of girls, and it comes. I don't know why. Perhaps
Flora has it.
I'm sorry.
Flora has it.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Does it curve sideways?
Just like that, yes.
That's
like
right.
that, yeah.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
she's inherited it from her.
Yeah.
Thank God she hasn't been put into into plaster of Paris, poor girl.
Sometimes, yes.
Yes.
And what sort of things, other than the academic side, do you think it taught you that you drew on in the rest of your life?
Well, I have another friend who isn't in the picture because she came the next term, called Will, Maureen Loweth, Will. And Will and I always tend to comment that there's nothing like a Cheltenham education for making you tough. Because you were really left. We didn't see our parents. I didn't see my father for 7 or 8 years. and there wasn't any bullying at all, as far as I can remember. But a boarding school in the wartime is quite a sort of tough time.
It's an education, all right.
I mean, we were taught very well, otherwise I wouldn't have got to Cambridge.
But
You were
people
taught
cruel?
discipline.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Were
What?
people cruel to each other?
No. No. I mean, you always knew if you were in the group or out of the group. And, you know, I teetered on the edge of a group that was slightly older than me, of which the sort of head scion, if that's the right word, was Colette Clark, daughter of Sir Kenneth Clark of Civilization, and sister of Colin Clark and Alan Clark, who was the MP who wrote the diaries and things. And when we were both rather younger, we were very close friends, and I used to go out for weekends with her parents and things. And then as she got older and more mature, and I was being left a bit behind, I rather dropped back to the class behind me, I mean the year behind me, and I found it easier making friends there. But we weren't cruel, no.
But tough in what way? If it taught you to be tough, I mean, what
Well,
sort of...
Well, I mean, you had to get yourself from house to school in time.
Which
You
would
know,
be
you
a
had to
trip up.
walk. It was a half-hour walk, in whatever weather, from your house to your school. And in the winter of 1947 was the Great Cold Freeze, and that was really tough because, of course, the house wasn't really heated. They couldn't afford to heat very much. You did have hot water to wash in, but I remember us all having to take turns to sit on what radiators there were in order to keep warm. Miss Wace said that it gave us would give us piles, and so we went to do it. But she was the most extraordinarily awful woman, really. She didn't like us helping to move 5 of us to push a piano into the right place because she said it would damage, this is the great phrase between Will and me, damage our childbearing capacities. Well, actually, she had 4 children and I had 4 children. I think Miss Wace perhaps was wrong. But she had these ridiculous ideas.
Just intervening, Diane, at Fletty's in 1944 and 45, we had to sit on the radiators too.
You would have done.
A bag of place in the radiator.
That's right. It was terribly cold for a very long time, with deep snow and frost.
And have you been back since you left?
Oh, yes.
I took Alan. Yes, I took Alan back, not so long ago.
Very
And-
impressed.
Yes, and I wanted to show him the Princess Hall, the marble corridor, black and white, the most beautiful corridor, which we were never allowed to run, absolutely silent. You just walked the corridor. And when we were there, I saw that exactly the same rules applied. No running, no talking. Just, you know, you just used it. The marble hall, the marble corridor, the Princess Hall, the lower. There was the lower hall as well. We
Lovely,
did our exams. Nice garden, very
lovely
nice garden.
bust of Miss Beale.
Miss Beale, yes, that's right.
And I remember it must have been exactly as it was when Janet was there, except for one thing. All the girls walked down the corridor demurely, but you saw that their shirts were hanging out of their
At the back.
backs.
Was
It
there
was
one
that
act?
one act of defiance.
Defiance Rebellion. Miss Popper would never have agreed to
No,
that.
certainly not.
Absolutely
No.
no.
And what did you feel when you were back there? Was there sort of warmth
It
or
was...
terror? Or...
No, certainly not terror. No, it wasn't a place
They were
that was
greeted very
frightening.
warmly. Greeted
Yes,
very well.
yes. And I had good friends. I mean, I made really good friends. That was actually the second time I've been back, because I went once with Jane and Alan Stacey, just to have a quick look. But
So it was one of the first schools for women
yes,
created in
yes, boarding schools certainly. And my mother lived in there was a road called Parabula Road, and we stayed in the hotel. Remember there? We had our tea there, and she was in one of those boarding. So they came from Scotland and boarded, and they've got a record of all 5 of those grandmothers and things in the school records.
I think Cheltenham Ladies College is still one of the premier schools, equal to places like Godolphin and others.
Oh, it's much better than Godolphin.
Oh, that's right.
Goodness me. Godolphin, well, yes.
Good God.
Godolphin, well, it's
But
not bad.
you played lacrosse with them, didn't you?
Well, I hated lacrosse. I enjoyed hockey and cricket. And I remember on the one occasion when my dad, for some reason, was over from the west coast of Africa back to see the government about something. He was on leave, I think. And I was in the cricket match. There was a cricket match, and I was there, and I was bowling. And so he came. He adored cricket, my dad. He commented on the cricket matches in Barbados.
Certainly.
I mean, on test crickets, if you see what I mean, occasionally. Anyway, he came to watch his youngest daughter playing cricket, and I bowled a hat trick. A hat trick is where
Three wickets.
Three wickets, one after the other. It was amazing. I never did it again before or since, but because he was there, don't know why, but I managed it then.
And he was happy.
Oh, he was very proud. Yes, he was. Mind you, cricket stood me in very good stead later. If I may just digress a minute, when I got to university.
Indeed, yes.
You know this story,
No,
don't you?
no,
Yes.
go ahead.
Oh, well, when I got, in my first year at
Girton.
in Cambridge, I was in my room one afternoon and I heard footsteps coming down the corridor, very long corridors in Girton, far too long, very cold. And anyway, the footsteps stopped eventually at my door, and there was a tap and I opened it. And this was an unknown girl saying, I say, you don't by any chance play cricket, do you? And I said, well, I played cricket at school. Would you come and join us? Because we're trying to make up a team to play Oxford. And if you would come and have a practice first. So I said, yes, well, all right. I don't suppose I should be much good. Anyway, so I did join them, and I earned a half blue. I was allowed a jacket, and there's a photograph of me wearing my blue for Cambridge, for women's cricket. I wasn't allowed to bowl, there was a much better bowler, but I did make the top score against Oxford, all of 9 runs. We lost.
Okay,
Was that enough?
I think, yeah, probably that's good. Unless you had anything, did you have any more anecdotes, or that's probably... I mean, you know...
There's a lovely church that you took me to near that place where you look across the Cotswolds, down the hill,
oh yes, yes, but that's later when I was doing archaeology.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah.
No, there was a lovely place called Hetty